Hello, it is the Political Napalm on YouTube, and today I'm going to be doing a video that was supposed to be a specific video, and now unfortunately has turned into an even more depressing and worse video. This post over here by Dean Lundell over on Twitter, with a Canadian flag and blue check, was what I wanted to do the video on. This is a bulletproof safe room demo for U.S. schools. And in it, you see this teacher or demonstrator create a bullet shelter in a classroom. And let's see how long this takes, okay? I believe it was 8 seconds. Yeah, I would say the range would be 8 to 10 seconds to create a bulletproof shelter in a school. By now, admittedly, when this is laid flat, it does not really do much in terms of size of the room. It's not like they're losing access to the wall. It looks like this is a dry erase board over here. You know, there's some decorations. They can have art. They could have people's art projects magnetized to it or something. And then in 8 seconds, it pulls out to create a little corner room that is bulletproof in case of a school shooting. And I wanted to do a video on this for several days now, and essentially discuss how this shouldn't be the way. This should not be the Mandalorian of schools for kids today. This was not my schooling whatsoever, and it should not, kids should not be subjected to this monstrosity sitting there reminding them that at any point in time they might need to use that room for safety. To me, it brings back memories of knowing what boomers went through as kids in the 50s of the Red Scare, the threat of communism looming, Russia, Cuba, the air raid drills and all of that. And it eventually stopped. There was a point in time which that was no longer needed, and it was stopped, and school became normal again. And I'm sure if you look in the heartland somewhere, they may have tornado drills, and we always have fire drills and everything. But an outside force acting upon the United States, causing a reaction within the United States, would stop. And schools would be quote-unquote normal. When I went to school, you know, there was standard fights. I didn't ever see knifings. I didn't see gun-related crimes and issues in schools. Didn't have metal detectors. Didn't have cops. I mean, I think I had a cop outside the school to prevent us in high school from driving away early, like leaving campus early when we shouldn't have. But that's all that it really was. We didn't go to school in a war zone. And then the world began to change. And now what we have is the latest school shooting, in which it took place in Nashville. And now the right is beginning to latch on to the fact, or the possible fact, that the shooter was trans, and they are beginning to express that being trans was a mental issue, being on transition drugs could have caused this. They are once again shifting the blame, and right-wing social media is alight with the fact that on LinkedIn, the shooter had pronouns expressing that they were trans. There was a time in which shootings, be it in schools or any shooting or any mass shooting, people didn't look to the categories. They didn't look to the politics. They didn't look to ID poll to find out what was wrong. They dealt simply with the situation. So Marjorie Taylor Greene right now is just basically being vile on Twitter with the comments being made about the shooting, and has even had some tweets deleted. And under the newer Elon Musk regime at Twitter, to have that happen, you know it has to be bad. So the murders are horrific. It is absolutely tragic. But to continue to play the politics game in this, whether the person is trans or not, male or female, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, none of those factors matter, and none of those should be tied into the overall narrative that that was what was at fault for this. Adam Kinzinger is taking a very different tact. It's time for America to discuss the availability of guns and its impact with mental health. This is enough. We all believe in the Second Amendment, but to not oppose background checks, permits to own guns, is simply nonsense. And of course, DC Drano's got to shove his dumbass comments in there. I've seen the footage of the start of this shooting, how it all goes down. The person drives onto the campus. Yesterday there was a narrative that once again it was an unlocked door. Based on the footage that I've seen of it, and it is on Twitter, it is not an unlocked door situation. The person shoots out a glass door and enters the school that way. And for a moment, the footage cuts to what I thought was a very horrific scenario of a video camera up in the ceiling of a T intersection, and I saw flashing, and I thought they were the gunshots because I was watching it on mute. It turns out it was not the gunshots. It was an alarm going off. It was the blinking lights of a typical school alarm, like a burglar alarm or a fire alarm. I was like, okay, wow, that is much, much better to know. It is what the person's background is not a factor in this, because we've seen all walks of life be victimized and be given into gun violence, be the creators of it and the victims of it. I'm old enough to remember when nobody discussed the politics of a school shooter. When Jeremy spoke in class, Jeremy didn't speak as a Republican. Jeremy didn't speak as a Democrat. Jeremy spoke as a bullied child who got into their hand a resolver, a problem solver. And that is what happens when these shootings happen. Somebody looks to a gun as a problem solver, as a resolver of a situation, and their sex, their gender, their individuality, their race, none of that matters when a brain in a skull says there is a problem, seek this gun to resolve it. It is the mental state of the person, and it is the tools in which that person is afforded that is the problem. Not their politics, not their race, not their age, not their gender. It is the mental state they are in and the tool that they seek to get it. For example, the Virginia Tech shooting. I had a friend who was in West Virginia, and in our group, a bunch of friends were concerned for him this day because they confused Virginia Tech with West Virginia, where the friend was. And they're like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I'm in West Virginia. This was in Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia." Nobody discussed when Seung-Hoon Choi shot up 2 colleges. Nobody discussed whether he was right or left. They discussed his mental state. They discussed the fact that his mental state was hidden from the college due to laws about mental state going into the college. Due to federal privacy laws, the university was unaware of Cho's previous diagnoses or the accommodations he had been granted at the school. In 2005, he was accused of stalking 2 female students. After an investigation, he was declared mentally ill and ordered him to attend treatment. Because he was not institutionalized, he was allowed to purchase guns. The shooting prompted the state of Virginia to close the legal loopholes that had allowed individuals educated as mentally unsound to purchase handguns without detection by the NICS. It led to the passage of the first major federal gun control measure in the United States, and it was signed by George W. Bush in 2008. This was an event that led to a reaction, and it happened. A Republican president reacted to this appropriately because it wasn't about politics. And yes, this man is responsible for one of the largest public shootings that has ever occurred in the United States. The stats are here that it is the deadliest modern U.S. mass shooting until it was surpassed 9 years later by the shooting at the Pulse Club in Orlando, and it's still the deadliest school shooting in the U.S. and the deadliest mass shooting in Virginia history. Granted, this was done with semi-automatic handguns and not Armalite 15s. High-powered rifles of the caliber of an AR-15. This damage was done by handguns. And that is a point in gun lobby's favor. Like, if anybody points out, well, look what Seung-Hoon Choi did with handguns, why is an Armalite 15 rifle the problem? It sounds like it's a mental health issue. To be fair, it is both. It is a mental health issue. It is a lack of checks and balances in gun purchasing when it comes to people who have mental health issues. But an AR-15 at this point in time could have made it even deadlier. Some people were injured escaping out the window, and when he was descended upon where he was, he chose to shoot himself. It is highly conceivable the death count and the injury count from gunfire could have been that much worse if he had access to a more higher powered gun, or a gun capable of shooting more rounds at any point in time. The right-wing narrative of good people with guns stop bad people with guns falls apart when you look at a Uvalde. It didn't work there. It falls apart in this scenario that more metal detectors, more school police, more locked doors would help because they shot their way in through a side door. I wager if somebody were to conduct research in the United States by polling police officers in a complete slice of American life, inner cities, urban areas, suburban areas, country areas, red states, blue states, red cities, blue cities, Alaska, Florida, Hawaii, Texas, California, New York, and every point in between. A proper 5,000 to 10,000 police force survey of beat cops all the way up to sergeants, desk cops, traffic cops. Ask them all slices of police life, how confident are you in a situation wearing standard police protective gear, not SWAT gear, standard police protective gear, and your service weapon against a shooter with an AR-15 or similar gun, similar high-powered rifle? What is your confidence in this situation to come out alive? If the answer is not high in 90% or more of the participants, then you know the issue. And you know that more policemen is not the answer. Like so many gun freaks will tell you. Schools should not be inundated with these rooms. They should not be inundated with extra police force and locked doors everywhere. When I went to school, my doors were unlocked. To get from one area of my high school to another outside was definitely the quickest way to go from one particular section of my high school down to another section. When the weather was nice, it was enjoyable. Even though it was illegal, we could smoke cigarettes out in the back unless somebody was catching us. People played handball. People went outside during their lunch and everything. I mean, for God's sakes, in California, you see in the movies, California's hallways are outdoors. How do you put locked doors and control that kind of environment? I asked my girlfriend a long time ago, who did a stint in California thanks to being in a military family. I was like, is it like that? Did you go to an outdoor school like you see on Beverly Hills 90210 and these movies and everything where people go from class to class outdoors? She said, yeah. How do you properly corral that? Where's the locked door in that situation, in that kind of school? And I would imagine there's probably even schools in Florida like that too. How is making school a actual prison for people, especially at this age? Can you imagine being 7 and having to process this entire thing? Being 6 or 5 in first grade and having to know what this is and what this protects against? That's frankly disgusting. And that's not what our life should be in the United States. K through 12. High schoolers, maybe they've got the mental capacity to deal with this properly. Hopefully. I would like to believe that. But that is ridiculous to have to know to go through that. Parents are so scared to send their kids to school when these things happen. And it doesn't matter if this person was trans or not. Cops wouldn't have been able to stop this. A locked door didn't stop this because it was shot out. What would have stopped this was less access to the type of gun that was used in this. Once again, was an Armalite 15 that positively shredded the glass door like it was a movie. It was no different than the scene in Aliens where Newt is like, shoot the glass to Hicks. So Hicks could get in and save Ripley from the facehuggers. Or no, and Newt isn't the one who says that. Newt is on the inside. When somebody's like, shoot the glass, and he shoots upwards towards the ceiling and they bust in through the glass. That is how easily this person got into the school. A locked door would not have saved that. The right to bear arms and be part of an organized militia. Do you honestly think the founding fathers in the 1700s had any concept of what this world, what these United States could become, what the gun power could become? And when I think, and regulated militia is up to interpretation of the reader unless you have actual proof of what was said to be a regulated militia at the time. Unless somebody who signed that Constitution defined at some other point in time what a regulated militia is, it is not Joe Blow American citizen being able to have access to an AR-15 or a MAC-10 or an Uzi or any gun of a similar nature. We had no problems decrying and going against the submachine gun warfare of the gangs in California in the 80s and 90s, everybody could stand against that and know that access to things like Mac 10s and Uzis were a bad idea. And they tried very, very hard to fix those problems. But now all of a sudden, it's no, you should have access to an AR-15. Why? What's the point? You're not going to hunt with a weapon like that. What is the point of that weapon in any shape or scenario? If you say, well, home defense, personal defense, I would like to see from somebody who is quite knowledgeable about guns and knows the scenarios of both a handgun and an AR-15, tell me, if somebody's breaking into your house, what is the timing of you going into a gun safe, getting out your handgun, getting out a clip, loading it into the handgun, safety off, round in the chamber, ready to defend yourself? How quick is that scenario as compared to the same scenario of getting out of bed, somebody's breaking into your house, you get out of bed, go to the gun safe, pull out your Armalite 15, load it with a clip, get around ready to defend your family? What's the timing difference of that? I would like for somebody who has the knowledge to say that and can prove it and back it up down below. So it isn't just an ephemeral discussion of an uninformed person saying, it seems like you would have a handgun much easier to get at the ready than a rifle, especially if stored properly to protect children and other people in the home. A proper gun storage, what's that going to be like to get that out and get that ready to defend your home as compared to doing it with a handgun? I'm sure anybody who works at a shooting range would be able to tell you how quickly you can go from completely unloaded to lethal ready gun and make that comparison. I would really like to know, because I've never done it myself. So I'm open to hearing proper knowledge on it for this discussion. But this is getting ridiculous. She is ridiculous. The things that are being said about this person on the right, they're salivating, they're foaming at the mouth to blame it on something other than access to the gun. And because this person chose something different in life that people like Marge believe in, doesn't immediately make the person mentally ill, because they find themselves to be trans or go in a way that is considered non-standard, air quotes, by people like Marge. And the politics, again, don't matter. Whether this was a right-leaning person, a left-leaning person, a diehard conservative, a rainbow pride flag flying card member, none of that matters. What matters is the actions the person took and the potential mental illness, the potential mental state that they were in when they did this, and the tools that were accessible to them at the time. That's what matters. AK-47, I mean, that's another one that was attacked highly in the 80s and 90s for the LA and California gang wars and everything, and guns that we could almost all agree on needed to be controlled. Well, now it's the Armalite 15 and similar high-powered rifles like that. Why is it now divided by politics between the people saying shall not be infringed on the right and should be infringed on the left? It shouldn't be a right-left thing. It should be a universal thing that something needs to be done, and it can't just be about extra cops in a school or a bullet. I mean, look at how much she's trying so hard to not lose her grip and pull that. That does not seem light. She's pulling with her full weight into this with bent knees and an arched back. And do you think if a school shooting was happening right then and there, that the mental state of a teacher, that they wouldn't maybe fall or slip and be scared out of their mind to do this as smoothly as a demonstration under no stress right now? And that took a full 8 seconds. That's 8 seconds if they knew something was happening. That doesn't stop if this is the first classroom along the way. Something needs to be done in the United States. And it isn't just about extra police, extra metal detectors, locked doors, bars, any of that. It has to be proper checks, proper backgrounds, extended periods of waiting time for perhaps higher powered guns. Things like bump stocks need to not be a thing. I believe bump stocks were already taken care of, even during the Trump administration, if I remember correctly. But access for the Nashville shooter, people like that need to have, everybody needs to have less access to those types of weaponry. Because what truly, other than a military scenario, what truly is the scenario in which a person should have a gun like that? What is the point of it if not to be on the offense in some way, shape, or form? And the whole thing about good people with guns stop bad people. Good people with guns can be a bad person with a gun in a second flat. Consider the scenario of a good person with a gun in their car, a simple 9mm handgun on a person in a car who accidentally gets cut off in traffic, looks up, thinks they see a phone in the other car being used while driving, sees nothing but misty red, is like, oh my god, this person almost got me in an accident with my 7-year-old boy, and is given to road rage and runs that other person off the road and shoots them in a complete mental state of derangement, because for sure they thought they were getting into an accident and they were so scared for their child and their life that a good person became a bad person in a split second because of road rage or a similar scenario. Now equip that person with a gun and let's see how that situation plays out differently than if no gun was there. You could sit there and say, well, the other person could wield their car as a weapon and run the other person off the road. And instead of the gun being the weapon, perhaps the car could be. That is true. But the car would also represent threat to themselves and their child. If they use the car to do that, they may also be putting themselves and their child further at risk. But simply getting the person to pull over by cutting them off or waving them down or following them to a stoplight or an intersection or something like that and then pulling out the gun and shooting doesn't represent an immediate threat to their well-being or the child in the car. They believe they're safe because they have the gun. And, well, that's what it's for, self-defense. I was almost run off the road. I'm self-defending myself. That's how quickly a good person with a gun can be a bad person with a gun. So the answer isn't good people. It isn't cops. It's getting guns like an AR-15 out of the hands of people. And if we're going to leave it in the hands of people, it absolutely needs to be much, much, much further controlled than it is now. And the political slinging that happens when things like the Virginia Tech situation, Sandy Hook, Columbine, Pulse, Las Vegas, the Nashville shooting. Politics is not the answer for these shootings. It never is. It never used to be. It shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be in the future. What should be looked at is the person and the gun. The two combined need to be looked at, the human element of it and the weapon element of it. And this thought of like, well, if we take away guns, then there's going to be stabbings. question those cops again and put other scenarios in front of them and say, okay, what is your confidence in resolving a situation in which you have your service weapon and you are protected and the person you are against only has handguns or has a bat or a knife or a bludgeon or some sharp object? I would bet the delta would at least be at a minimum 15% higher than going up against an Armalite 15 or a high-powered multi-shot rifle. This isn't the Minutemen. Well-regulated militias packing in gunpowder and pellets or single-shot 2.76 rifles that's not the reality of today. That is not what people have access to. We are just about at Fallout Tactics levels of weaponry now. It has to be the human. It has to be the gun. It's the political napalm. Signing off. Discuss this down below. I'd like to hear about it.